To the extent that we live our lives in a manner that is consistent with the truth in our heart, we thrive.
Welcome to the Meier Clinics podcast, and you just heard a quote from one of your hosts, Dr. Lisa Day. Join our licensed clinical professionals from various backgrounds as they discuss fascinating mental health topics with a wide range of guests. Meier Clinics is a Christian counseling organization with multiple clinics nationwide dedicated to treating the whole person, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. Welcome to our listening family. We thank you for joining us.
Hi, everyone. We're here with Roundtable with Dr. Paul Meier, and we're going to be talking about a subject that always gets the most listens, and that is narcissism. But fear not. We're not going to ruminate too much on the things we've already discussed. We're going to talk about this in a new way and the concept of healthy narcissism, if that is actually a reality, and we'll discuss our thoughts on that, and destructive narcissism, and bring in our own behaviors into this one, because I know you all love it when we call ourselves out on things. So, Paul, thank you so much for coming on tonight.
I'm delighted. This is a fun topic to talk about.
Absolutely. And then we have the lovely and talented Melanie Van with us, too.
What's up with the accent, Kristin?
I have no idea.
Thank you. Thank you for the special little accent. I really appreciate it.
It's because it's so cold here that today, I guess I wasn't paying attention. I was so busy working that my nose started to feel like it was frozen, and I went and looked at my heat, and it was down to like 64. So my throat is weird. And I'm trying to warm it up and trying to do different vocal ranges and stuff to get it to warm up, because it literally feels like I ate ice cream 10 minutes ago.
I bet.
So I'll start with, if you Google and you get to Wikipedia, and it has a page, of course, devoted to healthy narcissism. And there's all kinds of people like Freud, who wrote about normal narcissism, and Salon, I don't know if that's how you pronounce the last name, but Ronnie Salon's healthy narcissism, and then, the impact of healthy versus destructive narcissistic managers. So there's a lot of, across the spectrum. Then there's other people who absolutely say there's no such thing as healthy narcissism. So I want to start with you, Paul, because you did a ton of research on this. Oh yeah, we're going to be definitely saying, oh yeah, I need to look at that. So, Paul, I turn it over to you let's talk about some of the research you did today.
Okay. Well, my own opinion is that there's all degrees of narcissism, and we all have some, and so I don't think anything that's narcissistic. Really, the definition of narcissism, really, is. In my opinion, it's anything that we do that's selfish and takes advantage or hurts somebody else. So, the Bible would call it sin. And so I don't think there's any such thing as healthy narcissism, because it's never healthy to hurt somebody else or take advantage of or manipulate other people.
Right.
But there's healthy people that are narcissistic, because all people are somewhat narcissistic. So I think there's a healthy degree of it, but it's still not good, But and then
right.
if there's extreme narcissism, then it becomes a problem. And if it's and they say that 1% of the population would be so extreme that they would call it a narcissistic personality disorder. That sort of surprised me. I really would guess it's a lot higher than that. I think that's research.
Oh yeah.
Maybe that's just people that are diagnosed with it, and
that's what I think. People that are diagnosed. And we all know.
I was going to say none
get therapy. So
yeah, there's no way to.
We have no actual criteria to talk about numbers, because they don't show up in therapy or stay very long.
Melanie, what percentage of the population, you're a counselor, what percentage of the population would you guess are would be narcissistic personality?
I would say more like 10 or 15% for sure.
Yeah, I would too.
Yeah.
And one thing that surprised me is that it's equal between men and women.
Yeah.
Men get a lot worse rap for it, but it's more subtle in women.
True, but it's there. I believe that hands down.
Let me read this just brief paragraph here. The ratio of narcissistic men and women is 50-50, but women hide it more because of our culture. Men are expected by society to be more aggressive outwardly, but female narcissists are pushed by our culture to be quote-unquote sweet and less outwardly aggressive, but are equally aggressive in more subtle ways, like bullying, gossiping, pitting people against each other, and so it affects both males and females alike. It's a fallacy to think that it's only the male population. That's because, we hear about men beating women and raping women and all that sort of thing. Let's see, but such an errant thinking is dangerous because it denies the harm that women can do to their victims. Yep. Female narcissists render their victims to just as much pain, humiliation, chaos, and destruction as that wielded out by their male counterparts. More men present with narcissistic traits than women, but there's but women, because women's is more, like I said, it's more subtle, so it's harder to pick up lots of times.
Absolutely, yes, it's more covert because we're socialized to be more covert.
Yes, when I think about a woman narcissist, I think about the word cunning. They can be extremely cunning and manipulative. And sometimes the sweetness is used in a very divisive way. So it just doesn't present itself. I mean, some of the sweetest people in the world, women, end up being, raging narcissists on the inside. So got to watch out.
Exactly. Wait for that first mask start to slip, and then it comes off completely. And
yep.
Yeah, exactly. So, Paul, what would you say, in doing the research, what did it say in terms of here's what quote unquote healthy narcissism is, or narcissistic traits are?
I didn't read. Yeah, I didn't. Okay, narcissistic traits. Okay, let's see. What's the best way to do this? Here's some common traits, and then I've got a list of maybe 100 of them that we don't want to read, but we do want to get vulnerable today. So, an obvious self-focus. Here's some of them. An obvious self-focus in interpersonal exchanges. And I'd say I do that sometimes. I'll find myself with people and find myself bragging about things, name dropping and stuff like that.
Me too.
I think everyone does that a little bit. Everyone does that. This takes me back to our conversation about personality the last time. Was that our last show, Kristin? On personality?
People loved that show. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I mentioned on the show that I'm an INFJ, and part of the INFJ personality is to be introverted, but also introspective and thinking. And so I'm oftentimes in my own little world dissecting things, and that can come off as being narcissistic, I'm sure, even though that's totally not what I'm trying to do. It can come off as that for sure.
But it can look like it.
Yeah, definitely.
Let me read you, I'm looking at this on Wikipedia, and it has a column for healthy narcissism, and it's very short. There's only 5 listed. And then there's a column for destructive narcissism.
Yeah,
and I'm not saying
I've never heard of
I'm not saying I agree with it.
So
it's thrown around.
I might agree with it. Tell me what it is.
Yeah, so the characteristic would be, let's say, self-confidence. Under healthy narcissism, that would be high outward self-confidence in line with reality. The destructive narcissism column would say it's grandiose.
Oh, that's ridiculous. I mean, that's ridiculous because self-confidence is a good thing.
Yes.
I know. That's why
the Bible even says, "Cast not away your confidence." Don't throw away your confidence. Be confident.
Yep.
That's a healthy
thing. And
I don't know why they would call that
healthy narcissism.
Why would they call that healthy narcissism? Because it's not narcissism. It's not hurting anybody to be confident. Okay, I just don't like that term, healthy narcissism.
Yeah, I don't like it either. And there are a lot of people that just don't believe that if you have 0% narcissism, that's, or if you have 1% narcissism, that's good. That's bad. And there's many, many, many therapists, MDs, lay people, that believe that. But the next one is desire for power, wealth, and admiration. Under healthy narcissism, it says may enjoy power. And under destructive narcissism, pursues power at all costs, lacks normal inhibitions in its pursuit.
Okay, and there's could be real mature ways that we could desire power. If our goal is to help other people, then us doing a podcast, is in a sense a desire for power, not the power to get recognition. I mean, although that may be, I'm sure that's part of my unconscious motives, because I like it. But hopefully our main goal is because we like, all three of us like to help people, and so we're using technical power to help thousands and thousands of people, and that's fun.
Right. I look at it too, like in degrees. So younger years, in my 20s, when I was, when I started my first company in my late 20s, and I, I cut some people off at the knees because they weren't meeting my expectations, or I, just did things that I wasn't mature enough to be confident in my own power. I was still learning. I mean, there are definitely ways where I behaved more narcissistic, and I wouldn't put it in the healthy category completely, unless you could say, well, for a 26-year-old, that's pretty standard, and you evolved out of that. I mean, that's kind of how I look at it, but I still don't know that I believe the word healthy narcissism. So, okay, the next one is relationships. Real concern for others and their ideas, does not exploit or devalue others. That's under healthy narcissism. And then we have destructive narcissism as concerns limited to expressing socially appropriate response when convenient, devalues and exploits others without remorse.
Narcissists don't have empathy. A healthy person would, all three of us, if we saw somebody suffering right now, we'd be sad, we'd cry, and we'd get angry and want justice and want to protect. And a narcissist would not even empathize. He would just observe. He or she would just observe and not have empathy,
or even excited about it.
Or even get excited about it. Yeah.
I think too, in some of that, Go ahead.
Okay, I have to admit, like, I thought of something just this weekend. I won't get too specific, but there was, I could see a sad commercial of children starving in Africa and start crying, just from a commercial. And so I'm an empathetic person, but somebody that in our popular culture that I really, really, really don't like, got injured, and not a horrible injury, but got injured. And my first thought was, "Oh, good." And then my wife, in fact, my wife and I both said it at the same time. We saw it on TV, and we said, "Oh, good," And then we both thought, and we looked at each other, and we said, "That's not right." We should have empathy for that person too.
Oh, karma.
Yep.
Karma.
And that's like normal. I mean, that's well, I think too, it's okay, so concerns limited to expressing socially appropriate response when convenient, devalues and exploits others without remorse. So to me, that reads like, okay, their concern, someone who's destructively narcissistic or is narcissistic totally, if we aren't going by the healthy narcissism piece, everything is an extension of themselves. So when they feel empathy or shallow empathy, if they're capable of having that at all, for other people, it isn't really about that other person. It's them feeling in some way sorry for themselves.
Yeah.
And it really isn't about that, or that they got caught.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's that whole concept of cognitive empathy versus emotional empathy, which a lot of narcissists are very good at having cognitive empathy. They know exactly when they're supposed to be empathetic, and they can be very good actors in doing so. But in reality, there's absolutely no connection. They can't put themselves in someone else's shoes. And it's really just an act so that they appear to be, kind and considerate, when in reality, it's the furthest from the truth.
Oh, yeah, they're big phonies. They're big pretenders.
Yeah.
They pretend to be really good, really bad.
Yep. So the next one is ability to follow a consistent path. Under healthy narcissism, it says has values, follows through on plans. Under destructive narcissism, lacks values, easily bored, often changes course. See, this is where I'm like, there's so many layers to this. I don't see what has values and follows through on plans has to do with a term like healthy narcissism. But anyway, going by this grid, that's what
I don't even use that term anymore. Healthy
yeah. Okay. So the last one, and then we'll move on.
It's healthy. It's positive traits that some people could misinterpret as narcissism. That's what I would say.
Okay.
Like self-confidence. Some people say, oh, that person's really narcissistic because they're so self-confident. Well, no, they may not be. They may be real humble and still self-confident in certain areas. So.
Well, think about that in terms of I was on a guest on a radio. Yeah, I don't either. But I was a guest on a radio show with a psychologist or psychiatrist. I don't remember, but he's got a really, really popular show. And towards the end of the show, he said, you are really confident. And it was the first time I'd heard a male say that to me, that was saying it as a compliment, or that I was able to take it as a compliment, because this is part of the female-male thing that you were talking about earlier, Paul. I've always had this level of confidence. I don't know where it comes from. I certainly didn't learn it from my family, but I've always had that, which is why I could run my own business and be a consultant and do podcasts and all those things. But the way I was raised was, self-confidence is bad. Like that's not an attractive quality, especially for a female to have. And I was constantly being pitted against men who were confident and could brag and do all these other things, to the extent that it was unhealthy. It wasn't, a nice, humble pie sort of confidence. It got into, unhealthy side. And I was always like, well, why did they get to do it? And I get in trouble for just having a smidge of confidence. So that goes back to the male-female stuff.
Chauvinism. That's chauvinism.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. So, okay, last one. Foundation.
You are confident, Kristin. And I don't see that. I know you real well. And I know, so in our private conversations and things like that, I know that how much you care about others and want to do good, and your goal in life is to just help as many people as you can. But you're confident to all the things that you're doing. I could not ever do the things that you do.
Oh my gosh, Paul! Seriously,
you got a bunch of balls rolling.
How many books have you written? And you're
no, I can do a few things well, and so I've I'm confident in my ability to do psychiatry and write books and care about people and I love clinical work. I love talking to people and really good. But there's other things that I'm horrible at. I mean, I don't know a carburetor from a hubcap, you know.
Neither do
I can't find my way
I.
across the street in directions, and I can't. I'm lousy at business.
Yeah,
And
I'm
I
not.
came out zero in that personality test you guys were talking about. I came out zero for leadership because I'm more of a cheerleader than a leader. I am not a leader.
That is funny.
People think I'm a leader because I've got a large national chain of nonprofit clinics, but I don't run them. My little sister runs them. I couldn't run them if my life depended on it. You know, I don't have.
And
I'm not a leader. I'm a cheerleader.
that's part of what I think the balance is nice when you can be both the cheerleader and the leader at the same time. That's what I try to go towards with what I'm doing. I want to be able.
You are a leader. You are a leader, and you get stuff done, and you're creative. And
I can't help it. I came out breech. Yeah, I came out breech feet first, and I've been doing it ever since. I can't help it. I was either going to be a good leader or a bad leader, no matter what I was going to be a leader. So thankfully, I don't have a lot of the unhealthy narcissism, or I've weaned it out of myself over the years. Life beats it out of you if you really are not someone with, especially with a personality disorder. Life and face planting many, many times will beat the unhealthy narcissism out of you. But okay, the last one is foundation. Healthy childhood with support for self-esteem and appropriate limits on behavior towards others. And the destructive side would be traumatic childhood undercutting true sense of self-esteem and or learning that he or she doesn't need to be considerate of others. I mean, yeah. Melanie, what do you think about that? Because, you know, we did not have a lot of healthy childhood stuff, and yet we chose to go in this other direction than the not learning how to be considerate of others. So what do you think about those two things?
Yeah, well, I mean, I was lucky, and I had my parents, and they were extremely supportive and very caring and did things for other people continuously. You know, my dad was a coach, so I had my parents as a foundation. Now, the other things that have happened in my life were certainly very traumatic, and certainly could have taken me down a road that I didn't want to go down. But as I was listening to you and Paul talk, I was thinking that we all have narcissism. We're all very egocentric as children, and as we age, we're supposed to outgrow our narcissism. And that's what I was thinking. And we all know that narcissists are like toddlers that stomp and have fits, right? Because they literally see the world in this very limited worldview, because for whatever reason, they have not been able to transition and grow past their own narcissism. So I think those of us that would not be diagnosed clinically as a pathological narcissist, we may have areas in our lives where the growth has been stunted, and maybe somehow narcissism works in and out there. But as our healing continues, I think those traits just get less and less. So I think that's the key is working through the trauma or whatever it is that you've been through. And I even think that, you know, an adult can get into adulthood, not have any trauma and not be a narcissist, and have an extreme trauma and revert. I really think that's probably happened, which is really kind of crazy and sad. But anyway, so those are my thoughts, is that we all have narcissism, as, you know, we're born with it really, but we're supposed to grow and develop and push through those things, because selfishness should not feel good. Self-serving should not feel good. And basically it does feel good for narcissists to be selfish and self-serving. That's how they keep their ego going, because their ego is weak. And so,
you know, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard for people to see a newborn baby and think of that newborn baby as being
a narcissist. I know.
Narcissist. But a baby is. They think their view. You know, Piaget did a lot of studies on kids growing up and stuff like that. And when you're a little infant, you are the world. You know, I mean, you are the world. And then as you get a little older, you realize that you see your mom as an extension of you, somebody that can give you food when you're hungry and change your diaper when you're wet and things. And they say a lot of people who end up narcissistic have mothers that weren't real empathetic and didn't give them hugs, and didn't give them, that kind of affection when they're growing up, and so they can become less emotionally attached because the mom may not have been as attached to the child, and some kids grow up. Since we're basically selfish when we're little, we learn through love and discipline to overcome that. As the older we get, the more we find out that we are not the world. There are other people out there, and
Right.
So the more we mature, the more we see ourselves as just a part of this huge world, and that we'd like to make a little dent, in the world, helping others. But if you grow up being spoiled, and your mom or dad gives you everything you want, and they act like the world revolves around you, and unfortunately throughout history, males have been treated more that way. So I guess there ought to be more males than females that are narcissists. Maybe I'm not agreeing with that 50-50 thing that I read, but males tend to be more spoiled than girls in general, usually. And but if you're spoiled, you're allowed to remain a narcissist. You don't outgrow it.
Yes.
You're still entitled because your mom and dad told you were entitled. And then some narcissists are that way because they were beaten and traumatized growing up. They had parents that were physically abusive and sexually abusive, and if you're abused enough when you're young, in those first 6 years of life, then you feel like the whole world is against you and people are worthless. They're just, you just have to learn to manipulate your way in society to survive. And so
Right.
some narcissists are spoiled. I think the majority are spoiled, or they don't have any attachments, and then a lot of them are also abused.
Hi, this is Dr. Paul Meier of the Meier Clinics. Our Christian counselors across the country have a goal of helping all those who come to us to become what God has called them to be. If you're in a situation where you're not at peace within yourself, or you just feel like there's joy that's missing in your life, we can come alongside to help you obtain peace and joy.
This message is sponsored by the Meier Clinic Foundation, a nonprofit Christian counseling ministry. The number is 1-888-7-CLINIC, 1-888-7-CLINIC.
Agreed. And I love the distinction, because there are so many people out there that are just, even clinicians that study this and say it's always that they've been abused. And we had someone on our network who wrote an excellent article. I'm talking about Shahida Arabi, Melanie, and listeners, you know who that is. This young woman is just incredible. What a researcher. She's got a degree with psychology somewhere in that degree from Columbia. She's 25, I think, and she's just brilliant in how she writes about it. And she was writing saying they are not always abused. That is not true. There are plenty that were not abused, that did not have traumatic backgrounds. They were just completely spoiled and, grew up with this sense of entitlement. Disordered entitlement that they're stuck in, and they've refused to grow out of that. And she got attacked by several clinicians online saying that's not true, and
politically
like trolling.
The politically correct view is that we're all born good. We're only good, and then because we don't get what we need, we become selfish and narcissistic and things like that. And we're born good. I think we're born self-centered, narcissistic. If we don't get what we want right away, we scream, and holler, and we're not born good. But we can become good by parents setting examples of being good, and by discipline when we're not good.
Absolutely true.
Yeah.
Absolutely true.
I just think it's that, you know, old adage of biosocial, you know, psychosocial model. And that I think some people are probably born with brains, or maybe their hippocampus or amygdala are not quite as big, or they're too big, or whatever it may be. And maybe this person kind of has the physical brain of a narcissist, but maybe they grow up in a really kind and loving environment. And they may be really ambitious. They may not need a lot of sleep at night. Their sense of smell may not be great, because physically they have, you know, the DNA of a narcissist, but they may grow up in a loving home and not turn out that way. And then I think some of us are traumatized. This changes your brain chemistry and how things grow and progress. And so then they can't get out of that. And then some people are just spoiled. So I don't think there's no one way, there's no one path to narcissism. Right? I just don't. We are incredibly complicated human beings, and I don't think there's one pathway to any disorder. So and if we limit it, if we limit how we think it occurs, then that's also going to limit how we treat it, and that we're just boxing ourselves in. And I think that's always dangerous to do.
Yeah, some people have XX chromosomes. That's the female, right? XX, and then XY is the male. But some people are born with XXY, or the other way around, XYY. But I think it's XXY, and that naturally makes them real more hostile and aggressive, and in a negative way, and more narcissistic. So they're born that way. Some of them, so some people are born more selfish than others in different ways. But I think in general, it's mostly environment and choices that we make. Some people have a good environment and still choose to become selfish. So I think sometimes a girl that grows up very beautiful is at a disadvantage, because people want their attention, and they give them whatever they want. And if they're in high school, they can, everybody just sort of, favors them, or tries to be their friend and stuff like that. And so they become narcissistic, or people that were just a nobody growing up, and then they become, they develop some, make a lot of money, by some invention or something, and they may have been a nerd all their lives, or something, and then all of a sudden they're real rich, and then they get attention for that, so they choose to become more narcissistic. So it's genes, environment, and choices again.
Exactly. And I think that people can, like you said, Melanie, people can come at it in different stages in their life. Like, they are very narcissistic as a baby, and then they learn through healthy parenting, oh, maybe that's not attractive behavior, and let's try getting attention for being kind and nice. And, they go through that stage. And then, like you said, Paul, maybe they were always a nerd, and then their invention goes wild, and now they're super popular, and they spend 10 years as the most narcissistic, self-centered, entitled jerk ever, because of this event that happened, positive or negative, in their life. And then through that decade or whatever of really having high narcissistic traits, they are then humbled and go, wow, are able to look back at themselves and go, yeah, that was really not attractive behavior. Oh my gosh, everybody from that decade, I need to go apologize to. And those are people that can evolve. And then you have other people that I think get stuck there and think, well, this is a way to have power. I don't want to evolve from this. This is fantastic, and I'm going to stay here. So I think you have to have that underwriting sense of wanting to evolve, and evolving takes a certain amount of pain and a lot of introspection, which narcissists are, not necessarily good at.
They have, they do. They have pain in the sense that I don't believe anyone can be truly happy and be a narcissist. They may act happy.
I agree.
I haven't met any happy narcissists in my life, because I think happiness can only come when you love and are loved, by one or more people, and that a genuine empathetic hearing and love is the only thing that brings happiness.
I agree, absolutely. Well, let's turn a little bit over towards the things that we've noticed in ourselves, because listeners love it when we call ourselves out. And I have to say this too. I just spoke to someone tonight who's thinking about being a podcaster on the network. They've been listening to the different shows on the network, including mine, for a long time. And one of the things that they said to me tonight was, I'm so glad that you guys share your personal stories and that you share them about different things, good things and not so good things, because it's validation for many of us who are sitting and listening, thinking that we're crazy, we're awful, we did this horrible thing, and then we hear you admit to it, or you say you're struggling with something, and it's like, oh, okay. It's almost makes it okay for them to be human. So I'm going to start off with you, Paul.
Oh, you are?
Let's put Paul on the spot.
I'm sitting here in front of my computer, looking at a long list of narcissistic traits, and I'm thinking, man, I've got almost all of those. And I've got you guys fooled into thinking I'm humble. I mean, that's one,
That's so fun. See, I think those things too. Wouldn't it be the biggest? What's the word I'm trying to find here? The biggest act or the biggest magic act if all of a sudden I turned out to be this raging narcissist and I fooled everybody. I think about those things too. But anyway. Let's start with you, Paul. I'll be the second narcissist here.
Here's some of the narcissistic traits that I have sometimes. I think I am a humble enough guy and a loving enough guy so that I don't go around looking for ways to purposely be narcissistic, but unconsciously, since part of me really is narcissistic because I'm a human, it comes out like. A narcissist easily shifts blame. Well, if my wife and I have a disagreement, I'm going to think that it's her fault, probably 90% of the time. And it's probably only her fault 80% of the time.
Paul.
I'm joking about that. That's a joke. I hope she's not listening.
Maybe 20%. You're terrible.
No, I'm sure it's 50-50. And then a sense of superiority places them above others. I don't know.
I don't see that in any way, shape, or form, Paul, with you. Like 0% that for you. No.
Yeah. Okay. But likes to be the center of attention. Yeah. And yeah, I do. And another one that goes along with that, dominates conversations because they believe that what they have to say is more worthwhile than what other people say. And I hate to admit to that. I guess I'm laughing out of guilt. I believe what you guys have to say is just as important as what I have to say. But part of me, I mean, I do talk too much on these programs, and then I feel convicted of it later. So,
you also know a lot, Paul. You know a lot, so you're over eager to share, and that's what ends up happening. Yeah, I don't think it's done out of a place of narcissism. You're just still really excited about psychiatry and psychology, and you just want to share. And sometimes, I think you feel like you go overboard on that, but I don't see it that way. It doesn't come across that way to me.
I've never felt disrespected.
Yeah,
I want people to know everything, and so that doesn't mean I need to be the only one that talks so that they know everything I think is important.
Right. It's a fine line. It's a fine line, but I think it's the place that it comes from, and it's not coming from a haughty superior. I can't even. I wouldn't even know what to do with myself if I ever felt like you were being superior. That I would be like, did Paul just get invaded by an alien? Like, that's so not you, So it doesn't come from that selfish place. It's more of a, like you said, I want to share what I've learned. But anyway, go ahead to the next one.
Sees criticism as a baseless attack. Well, I mean, I value constructive criticism, but sometimes when I'm criticized, I don't know, that may not be a good one too.
It depends on who's delivering
it. I'm looking at this list. Most of these I don't have,
See?
you know. Well, they think that they're special or God touched, and I do believe that I'm special, not because I'm special, but I think God has. He uses the foolish things of the world to confound the wise, and I think, you know, because I'm narcissistic and foolish, and, you know, deep down, I think God likes to use people with faults, and so I do think I'm God touched, but not because I'm superior. But
so are you saying that you think that you're touched?
Touched. Well, believe they are beyond the rules. Laws do not apply to them, and when I'm driving, so, speed limits are suggestions, and
that's Melanie.
my wife and I have already driven home in our own neighborhood at 2 o'clock in the morning or something, and I'll just drive through a stop sign or something, and my wife will say, you shouldn't do that. It's you know, it's against the law. And I say, well, it's only against the law if a policeman sees you do it. You know? I'm joking with her, of course, but
I've heard that.
I mean, I wouldn't break laws to risk other people's lives, but I don't drive the speed limit. People that drive the speed limit sometimes get a ticket because they're holding up other people. I mean, they need to get in the right lane, and if they want to go the speed limit.
And get out your way. Yeah. Well, let's go.
Those are some of the
Melanie,
ways. Those are some of the ways. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Those are some of the ways that I'm narcissistic.
So, Melanie, how about you? What ways? I promise I'll go next. But what ways have you looked at yourself, you know, in the past or currently or whatever, that you realize, oh, okay, those are some things that I need to work on. Yep.
Well, I think I've shared with you that I feel like I definitely had a time in my life where I was becoming overly narcissistic, and I recognize it now, and I cringe. And it was after a very traumatic event in my life. And then adding on as an adult, you know, I'm so introspective. So I think about myself and my personality. And, you know, even as a child, people kind of came to me for advice and, you know, just expected me to be maybe older and wiser and more mature. So I feel like I grew up really fast and have just always been the person that everyone else came to. And so there was this unspoken message in my head that no one else was going to take care of me. So I was going to have to take care of myself, because everyone always came to me to be taken care of. And so I think that untrue statement of I'm going to have to take care of myself led me into this very kind of narcissistic thinking where I was always just going to take care of myself first, because no one else was, because everyone always came to me from this strong persona that I had, or intuition, or whatever it was, or you know, easy to trust me or whatever. And so I was just like, well, I'm just going to look out for myself. That was like my ego was looking after itself. And I think there was a time in my early 20s where it really just reflected in my life choices. And, you know, and then sometimes it's just about priorities. I think I've told this on the show before, but I remember going to an interview in undergrad school, and it was a really great job, you know, that I could have had. It was actually a friend that my mom worked with, daughter worked there, and she was offering me the job. And I literally walked up in there and was like, well, I can't work this shift and this shift because working out is priority in my life. Like, I literally was just so narcissistic about it. And I literally, the woman was speechless. She was like, she looked at me speechless, and she didn't know what to say. And she says, well, you just sound like you know what you really want out of life. You know, I think she really didn't know what to say. And so, but there were other things too that I feel like that were just kind of narcissistic. But I think it was, you know, it was kind of this unhealthy thinking pattern in my own head that I was going to have to take care of myself. And so a lot of times I would put myself first out of self-preservation, which is where narcissism stems from. So I feel like I understand that. Maybe it's why I can understand narcissism so well. I certainly was lucky enough to, to be saved, and my complete viewpoint was turned around. The other thing that I feel like can be really narcissistic is I'm just stubborn. I am as stubborn as they come.
Yes, you are. Oh, my Lord.
I'm
have
not,
no idea.
I'm not going to listen to anyone else and what they say. I want to know myself. Like, I don't care if I end up, something bad happens. I have to know myself. I have to figure it out, even if the person knows it's going to fail or something. I'm just extremely stubborn about doing things my way. And so that is something that pops up pretty frequently. Now, I'm not going to inconvenience anyone else with it, but in my own little circle, I can be really stubborn about things. So those are the things that kind of pop up in my mind. How about you, Kristin?
Hey, Melanie?
Yes. Yes.
Before we go to Kristin, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
That people may want to know too. How you mentioned that when you experienced a trauma, you became somewhat more narcissistic, and I'm not asking that mention what the trauma is or anything, but how do you think a trauma? Because usually you would think a trauma would make somebody more, more humble, and or maybe I'm wrong, but how can a trauma make somebody more narcissistic? I'm sure you're right, but
good question.
That is an excellent question. I think it's all about your defense mechanisms. I think your defense mechanisms can go either way. For me, the trauma stemmed from literally just being abandoned by family, because I had told the truth about something that had happened in our family, and no one wanted it to come, from under the rug per se. And so I literally was, just left to deal with things on my own. And that was such a vulnerable feeling that I put up defenses that made me narcissistic. And I think that's what happens. It's unhealthy. A trauma you can have healthy coping mechanisms or unhealthy coping mechanisms. And I ended up having this very unhealthy coping mechanism of putting walls up, not letting anyone in, which basically I feel like what brought me out of my narcissism was that I realized how lonely it was. I was like, okay, I need someone else in here to help me take care of me, because it's awfully narcissistic for you to be independent, like over independent. And I am really independent, but it's kind of narcissistic to be that way. So I think my loneliness and my want and need to love other people, because what I realized was, okay, I've cut off my ability to let other people love me, but it's also cut off my ability to love other people. And that's really the basis of what my spirit is. I'm just a very loving person. And so literally I was dying on the inside. And thank goodness I had the insight to realize that, right? But I don't know if that answered your question or not, but I do think it's a lot about its defense mechanisms. I think that's what happens when people respond to a trauma. All sorts of dysfunctional things can happen that can make you that way. And then a lot of times trauma indicates being stuck or lack of growth or not being able to work through something. And I think oftentimes, that limits your ability to mature into less narcissistic behavior. So I think that's kind of what trauma does. It stunts you.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that reminds me of a song by Paul Simon that I think I've mentioned before on one of our podcasts, but beautiful song about somebody that grows up traumatized, and so he becomes narcissistic in a sense that he doesn't empathize with others, and he keeps people at a distance, and he has superficial relationships, and then he meets a really great woman, that he's either married to or in love with or something, and the name of the song is Something So Right. He says, I can't get used to something so right. And he said, there's a wall in China 1,000 miles long to keep the foreigners out. They built it strong, but there's a wall inside me that no one can see, and it takes a long time to get next to me.
Isn't that Paul Simon?
An example of what
I
thought that when you were saying that. So some people can react to trauma by walling themselves off and just like you said, being self-sufficient, and,
Yep.
but they're unhappy, they're lonely and unhappy.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Well, we're all
Okay.
done now, so we can
Justin.
go done with
Oh,
the show.
hush.
Kristen.
No, you have to go, Kristin.
Kristen, can you think of a single narcissistic trait that you
One,
have?
3 things. Come on, we have 3.
Good Lord. Yes. Are you kidding?
I've never
The
seen
list
any
is-
yet.
Okay, so the full disclosure. So, yeah, when I, had the childhood trauma and all that stuff, so I totally related to everything Melanie said. Well, that's hands down. That wall inside me and all that stuff. But I know that what happens is you have this uneven growth because the trauma happens, and then maybe you repeat patterns from your childhood because you haven't worked through that original trauma, and those are gifts for you to finally work on them. But some of those re-traumatizations can be further stunting in your growth, and so you lash out, you're angry, you are really self-centered, and then you come out of that time and you get humble and you make your amends and so on. So I've seen that happen over and over again throughout my life for sure. And I know that, like, when I started this company, when I started this network, I got pretty narcissistic in the beginning about it. And it was out of that same way that I go, where some people I had let in that were really toxic and really narcissistic themselves, and a mirror of stuff that I just pretended I wasn't. And they asked me to play in the land of narcissism with them, and I fully agreed and jumped on to do that. So I'm not blaming them. Okay, I want to make sure that that I take full ownership here of my own behavior. But I played in the land of narcissism with them to the point that it made my teeth feel like they were rotting outside of my head. And I've said that, Paul, in front of you. Like, I had some people that were part of this network that were like, the things they would say about me, it was like, I didn't go to the bathroom every day. Kristen's so wonderful that she does this and that and blah, 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 to the point where I would get a cavity listening to them talk about me. And I never got that as a kid, like that overblown whatever. So there was a part of me that was 5 years old and like, oh, I need to hear all this stuff. Oh my God, like it was the best ice cream you've ever read, until I got sick of it and went, oh, I can't believe that I lapped that up. And that was so obvious. Everybody could see what I was doing but me. And you know, I finally realized it, but I can say that my behavior during some of those times was pretty tough to take for myself and also for the people in my life. There's nothing like eating big slices of humble pie and the want to grow. You know, I mean, I think that's what sort of separates you from someone that wants to stay stuck there. I mean, sure, I could have stayed stuck there. I think a lot of people do, because it does feel good, but I have a want to grow up. I have a want to acknowledge the wounded child, be the healthy parent for her, and then be my adult self. I care very much about that. Why would I do all these shows? I mean, over 1,000 shows talking about mental health if I didn't want to grow up. But boy, was I unpleasant to be around. And I can't say that won't happen again in a different degree. I don't think it'll go as far as it did the first time, but I certainly was quite uncomfortable to be around during that time. So that's mine. Melanie watched it all, so she was there. Yeah. She's still here, so thank God it wasn't too awful.
What you said is when I do therapy with a narcissist, like I'm going to see one tomorrow. Nobody knows what date we're recording this on, so I could say that.
No,
but I'm going to see a narcissist tomorrow. That whenever she comes, I'm always happy to see her because she's such a sweet, humble person now. I've been seeing her since the mid '90s. So what is that, like 30 years? Yeah, almost 30 years. And I mean, I just do medicine checks now, but I used to do therapy. But I remember, I mean, she was real narcissistic, real selfish, and all that. And but she came to me because she was depressed, and so lots of times, if I like the MMPI and things like that, if I show a narcissist that they came out in the 99th percentile for being self-centered, I've had some that threaten to sue me and get, they get really mad at me, and I said, I'm not telling you that. That's what your test is saying. I'm asking you to think that's true. But with her, she was so miserable and lonely and depressed that I said, the most selfish thing you can do in there's healthy narcissism there, isn't it? I said the most selfish thing that you can do, as far as what's good for you, is to learn to love and be loved and quit manipulating others, because all these narcissistic traits that you're exhibiting are just bringing you misery. And if you learn to be a normal human that loves and gets loved and thinks of other people and tries to put them first and practices it, your life's going to get a lot better. And she believed me, and she really worked at it, and she's become, she turned out to be, I mean, she was just young, or very young then, and I mean, now she's got kids and I think a couple grandkids, but she was a great mom and a great wife and all that after she decided that, that being a narcissist was a miserable way to live. But it's hard for a narcissist to admit that he or she is a narcissist.
Absolutely. I think it takes a certain degree of introspection that you have to want to have, because some of them can be the most soulful people you could ever speak to, and you think they're so wise, and then you realize, yes, the words coming out of their mouth are wise. They've lived through a lot, but they really don't care.
Yeah.
That happens too.
And you wanted insight. You wanted to grow and become a better person. When you found yourself being somewhat narcissistic, because of your trauma and all that, and self-defense and self-reliance, you wanted to grow. I hate myself sometimes when I see selfishness in me. It just
I do.
I don't hate myself, but I hate that in me. I just grieve. There's nothing that makes me feel worse than seeing my own narcissism when I see it.
And that's why you aren't one. The last thing I'd say for me is this: haughty superiority and academic credentials were a way for my family to be this narcissistic organism of an unhealthy family. And so anytime that I know that I just naturally crested upon the behavior of being haughty and superior without even realizing that's what I was doing. Like, you learn how to be this way and then you behave it yourself. And for a long time, you don't even know that you're behaving that way. And it takes some serious guts to turn around and look at yourself and go, oh, that's ugly. I did that. So anytime I get even a little haughty or a little superior about something, I immediately go, okay, let's pop some air out of that balloon and look at what that's really about, because it's just, I can't stand it. But boy, does it come naturally. Until now, I don't think it comes naturally anymore, but which is good. It's not my home. It's a place I visit every so often. The visiting days are getting shorter and shorter. So those would be mine.
Well, I'm glad that all three of us could have some introspection. That definitely means we're not narcissists, right?
Yes, you have to have it.
We're not,
first of all,
we're
and
not
you have to want it.
Personality disorders, because
exactly.
Because if we were, we wouldn't have any. A narcissist doesn't have any guilt about being narcissistic.
Absolutely. And I think that we have to remember, listeners, that if you have the want to look at the ugliness of you, or what you deem as ugly. Maybe you need to look at, is that really ugly? And that's some things that my therapist does with me. Is that really an ugly thing, Kristin? That doesn't sound ugly to me. I think you've got some distortions there. So there's that, but you have to want to go down that road, or like Scott Peck's book, Take the Road Less Traveled. You have to have the want and the desire to do it, and then you have to actually take the grit, the sweat, the look at yourself in the mirror and all your quote unquote glory, and be brave enough to stare at yourself and your own abyss and your own madness. And those are great, those are wonderful things to strive to do, but not everybody can or wants to make that journey that you're asked to do over and over and over again as a human being. There's got to be some biblical thing around that, Paul, the constant journey of being human.
Yeah, I mean, I know, I mentioned a lot of times David prayed that prayer in Psalm 139, God, search my innermost thoughts and help me to walk in a way that's pleasing to you. And he realized lots of times that they weren't. And he was narcissistic when he committed adultery with, he was up on his roof and saw a woman in her yard taking a bath, because they had outdoor baths. I'm sure she had a fence, but he was up on the roof, so he saw her anyway. And so he had her husband killed and married her. And then Nathan, the prophet, came and told him about there's a man who had many, thousands of sheep, and he was having friends over for dinner, and he had a peasant that worked for him that only had one pet lamb, and he went and grabbed that pet lamb and used it to serve dinner to his friends. And David got so angry, he said, that man should be killed. And Nathan said, you are the man. You had all these, these opportunities and everything as a king, and yet you took that one good man's only wife, and you took her, and then David was convicted and grew out of that narcissistic attitude.
Right. Well, here's a funny to cap this off. Not that I need to be the only one that says a funny, but I just thought about this, and since my wonderful friend Michael listens to your shows, especially Paul, he'll get a kick out of this. Everything that is wrong with his phone is the fault of his phone. It isn't because he has an issue now with his sight. It isn't because he shoves his phone in his pocket full of keys and coins and sits on it by accident, and it's always the phone's fault. So today we get on the phone and I accidentally hit mute, and I'm talking away, and and he's like, hello, and so I finally went, oh, I'm sorry, I fat finger that often, and I noticed I've been doing that more, and I'm sorry about that. And I didn't do this as no. I just said, oh, isn't that funny? If that was you, you'd be blaming your phone. And he laughed.
What's funny about phones? What's funny about phones is if you what they call butt calling. You know what I mean?
Yes, butt dialing.
You have it in your pocket, and your butt accidentally hits the call button. And
yep.
And have you ever had people call you accidentally?
Oh yeah.
Yes.
And have you ever called other people accidentally?
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, I walk around going, who's
somebody
talking?
calls me.
Oh, it's my behind.
Calls me accidentally. If somebody calls me accidentally, I listen as long as I can. I guess that's not nuts, is it? I'm thinking, I wonder if he's going to say something bad about me.
I hang up immediately because I don't want to know. That's what happens.
Same with me, Melanie.
I'm just like, I'm going to hang up because I don't want to hear what's going on. I feel like I'm privately listening to someone's conversation. Yeah, we found out something.
I just don't want to hear them say something bad about me.
I don't think they're going to say something bad about me. I just,
especially if it's my kids that do it, then I'll.
Which is probably narcissistic of me to think that they randomly called me, but at that moment, of course, they would be talking about me in a negative way. I mean, it's, there's 1,000 ways we could look at this, but yeah, I've also walked around my home listening to someone talking and somehow I answered someone who was butt dialing me, or I was butt dialing someone, and walking around going, what? Is that the radio on? What is that? And I'm going in circles until I finally realized that my phone is in my back pocket. And I'm going in circles because I keep following the noise, which is in my back pocket. But anyway, well, listeners, we hope that you got an idea of, just more ways that we can view narcissism, what it is. We all agree that we don't really believe in the healthy narcissism piece. I think that just is like a misnomer, but it's something to examine as our society is becoming more and more narcissistic, and know that if it hasn't turned into a disorder, you have a choice.
You have to mention that. You have to mention that before we close, that our society is becoming more and more narcissistic. There's studies on that show that. When they, I don't know if they're still doing it, but they used to do an annual research study on people that were like 21-year-olds or something like that, and they'd ask them, "What's your goal in life?" And back, we just celebrated World War One, not long ago, the people that died in World War One and all that. But back in the Great Generation, the 21-year-olds, their number, if they listed 3 goals, it was to benefit mankind and to do this and to do that, things like that. And then you could see decade by decade, those goals became more and more selfish. And in recent generations, there's still good people now that are young, but the most common answer is to enjoy today. Just to feel good. You do that with a drug, or or sex with somebody that you don't love, or to enjoy today. It's one of the top goals that people have today. It's that we are becoming a more and more narcissistic culture, and that's a whole nother show. Why?
And we can turn that. We can do that on our next show, because we're going to keep a theme going here to so we don't have to feel like we've got to get it all out in this in this 1 hour. But thank you to both of you. This I have lots to dream about and write down in the morning, Paul, and wonder, when are we going to do a dream show so Paul can analyze this?
Yeah, you've had some crazy dreams lately. We need
to get people to ask people to write in with their, or email us with dreams. And when we save up them. I love
listeners, do that. Send in your dreams.
Patients their dreams all the time. Ask them what I had a patient last week that said, "I'm having nightmares and they're really bad dreams." And I tell them, I say, "There's no such thing as a bad dream. Even nightmares are not bad dreams. All dreams are good dreams. So nightmares may not be pleasant, but you can learn things from nightmares that help you to grow and protect yourself. And so every dream is a good dream, because we can learn something from every dream."
Absolutely. So listeners, send an email to info@mhnrnetwork.com and write us about your dreams and get them analyzed by the best. We won't say your name, of course. We won't say your email address unless you really want us to, and say you have my permission. But, just send them in, and last time I asked for someone to send stuff in, a bunch of people sent. It was funny, because we did ask for this once before, and a bunch of people sent in their dreams, and I was surprised at how many of them were so similar that when we whittled it down, Michael and I actually did it together. We read them all, and we whittled it down to just, out of we had 75 emails or something. We whittled it down to like a top 10, because you don't realize how many people have the same type of stuff going on. So we were able to do that with you, Paul, and you gave answers like naked in school. Yeah. Well, okay.
We see repetitive. Yeah, you're right. That's why it's easier to analyze them if you're a therapist and you're asking them all the time, because you do see certain ones popping up in certain situations a lot.
Absolutely. Well, this was awesome. I'm excited about doing our next one. And listeners, of course, we want to say thank you to our listening family for tuning in to another edition of Roundtable with Dr. Paul Meier on Mental Health News Radio.
enjoyed this podcast. Tune in next time for another engaging discussion on relevant mental health topics. If you have any questions about Meier Clinics, please visit our website at meierclinics.com. That's MEIER clinics.com, or call us at 888-7-CLINIC. Don't forget to leave us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or any of your favorite podcast apps. And please note that we are a member of and produced by Mental Health News Radio Network, MHNRnetwork.com.